next day, we are out here. Second catch can got here, but we're not worried about that right now. We need to figure out what is going on with why this is not running on all 6 cylinders. Weird thing yesterday when I started poking around for a couple minutes. With the ignition on, I have no 12 volts to injectors or coils, but the car is running, which is weird. So that's where we're gonna start. We're gonna see where our 12 volts is, why we're not getting it. We're getting a volt, like single volt to all power. So we've got to look into that. Now, for those of you who don't know how this works, the ignition coils all share common ground. They all are provided a common power, and then they each get a signal sent to them to tell them to fire and for how long to fire. And the coils charge up a capacitor inside, it discharges. So that works. Injectors, really simple. It's basically a solenoid. You have 12 volt power constantly supplied to it. And then when the ECU wants to fire an injector, it holds the ground open, or I should say it closes the ground for a set amount of time, the number of milliseconds you need, and that's what makes the injector open. So you should have constant 12 volt to all of them. So in this case, to all 6, there should be constant 12 volt, and there's not, which is weird. So I need to hook up and go into the IPDM, see if there's any settings in the IPDM that are messed up, and that's gonna be the first step. If there's any settings in the IPDM that are messed up somehow, maybe when I did the update, it did that, I need to rectify that. While I'm in there, we also are having an issue where the headlights are just turning on, which is currently controlled by the IPDM, which we're going to be changing over to a different PDM for body control stuff so that the two aren't intermixing, so that if there's a failure with one, we don't have a failure with the other. It's just a little bit of redundancy. There's a reason that auto manufacturers run, you know, BCM and ECU and different relays and all that stuff. All right, so I skipped all the diag video because it really was kind of boring. Verified all the coil packs are firing, verified our injectors are firing. We're getting 2 codes out of the IPDM for circuits that aren't connected to anything, called Haltech. They don't know what's causing it. Told me it's something to do with the firmware, and then they said the fix will be in the next firmware update. I know Haltech is like loved by a lot of people, but I'm really like, the customer service has been just absolutely atrocious. And I don't know if it's just because the guy I'm talking to in the US just doesn't care. I said, I'm frustrated. I'm angry because the amount of money that this customer spent on Haltech stuff, it's terrible customer service. It's horrible. So just finished putting the exhaust on it. I'm bleeding out the intercooler system right now, which actually I think it's pretty much done being bled. The customer's coming with a laser thermometer so that when we fire this up, we can see if we have a dead cylinder, if it's not running right. I'm gonna sit in the car this time and just verify that the tube is the way it should be. Everything's now hooked up, like absolutely everything. Not clamped down on the piping because we don't need to, but everything is hooked up. So we should be like running today. It's not going to be, it might be driving by the end of the day. I just have to deal with the whole clutch line situation. But the exhaust's on so that everything will go out the door and won't choke us out. And then I can also I'll be able to actually hear stuff better instead of running an open down pipe. So that's where we're at. So the issue ended up being 2 of the coil pack wires were switched back and forth. So the thing is now running good. We have an issue where the wideband sensor is dead. It says calibration, but you can't calibrate it. So we have to get a new one of those. So we're gonna just let it warm up. Make sure there's no leaks, get everything up to temperature, and then we'll shut it off and do an oil change on it. But it is running good. I did the oil change on it. Coolant is gonna bleed now. Playing with the idle. I'm kind of like tuning the fuel off of smell. It shouldn't be too far off. The only real difference is the cam. Compression is pretty much the same, I believe. If not a little lower. But basically tuning it off the exhaust smell and how it's running. Probably could use a little bit more timing than 18 degrees. Now we're gonna let it warm up again. Cool off, warm up, cool off, warm up. That turbo spools up really fast. I don't know if you can hear the video, but that was a blow-off valve going off, just slightly revving it. Pretty uneventful video. We ran it 6 times. It's probably an hour run time on it, just idling. Trying to get the coolant system to bleed. There's a big air pocket in the heater core. So tomorrow I'm going to take care of that. I'm going to take it off of the firewall, let coolant go in it, it will spill out, whatever. And then I will pressurize it to get that filled all the way up. Or I'll just set the thing at a tilt, which is what you usually have to do in like the 350Zs anyway. So easy fix. I got to order new wideband sensor for it. I got it idling as good as I could off of ear and smell. So get a wideband for it. Gonna get the clutch line in there. So what we're gonna do is he's getting the slipper system that we sell. So we're gonna do this bit of hydraulic line, which I used for a mechanical slipper that I used to have. Run that down to the solenoid down there, which buys us the extra length we need to make the line he already bought work. That way we don't really need to get anything except for a couple of fittings for that. And then I have to get one more of these fittings for the sleeve cylinder. And then the clutch will be ready to go. And then it will be a matter of bleeding brakes and then putting clamps on everything that doesn't have clamps. So like right there, and then this pipe here needs the clamps put on it. And then I gotta put the second catch can on. So there's really just a bunch of little teeny tiny finicky stuff that is gonna take an afternoon to do. And then this thing's gonna be driving. What we'll do is first we'll put this on the dyno and just give it some like medium load to like 4,000 RPM rips, just to, if it's gonna leak or break or anything, I'd rather do it here. And then we'll take it out on the road and get it driving. And then once we do a couple hundred miles, usually 500, but in something like this, maybe 250, we'll bring it in and we'll tune it on gasoline and then slap some ethanol in it and make, I'm hoping it makes about 600-ish wheel. That's kind of like where the goal sits. The turbo's good for more than that this time. Oh, I also have to wire in all the pressure sensors. We jankily wired in the oil pressure sensor so I could read it on here just to check the oil pressure, and the oil pressure is good. But the only issue we might have with making power is the size of the exhaust. Now it's 2.5 inches, which is big enough for a decent amount of power. The problem being the turbo is small, don't get me wrong, for what it is. The exhaust housing's fairly small, so between that and then the length of the 2.5 inch, we might run into a 2 back pressure problem. First back pressure problem being manifold side, which will get compounded by exhaust side. So what we might do on this is what was done on the Cube, which is put a boost activated cutoff right at the bottom of that downpipe so that the air will go straight out of it once it's over about 7 pounds of boost. Or I might hook it into the boost controller so that it's going to be regulated to whatever pressure we want for it to open at. I can also, because I have outputs available in the Haltech, run a second MAC valve to modulate that. So like on ethanol, it will open up at a different PSI than on gasoline. That's something I can do. But that's about the only concern we have with getting 600 horsepower. Again, turbo is rated for way more than that. VQ35s, for reasons, don't like going much past that 600 horsepower, like 500 foot-pound of torque mark. So we're just going to avoid that. I gotta hook up the catch can. I don't know if I said that. I gotta hook up the second catch can. But that is all stuff to do tomorrow. But I'm thinking about selling a swap kit for these, if I'm honest. I just spent the past hour talking to Jason about how easy it is to do a swap like this and how you can do it for a lot cheaper than we did it if you're really trying to buckle down on costs. Like there's a way to use a lot more of the factory wiring if it's all working. An FT450 and then convert to like an LS style cable throttle. Then you can use the factory accelerator pedal. And then wiring the fuel tech up to this, you would need a trigger system, which I'm working on releasing a VQ35 trigger kit. But that would be the only like big add-on you would need. And then a transmission mount. It's really easy to put it in. Clutch line, I mean, it's pretty straightforward to do an NA. It starts getting a lot more complicated when you start putting a turbo on it, but the NA VQ35 is capable of more power than the turboed VG30 that these come in. I'm talking about wheel horsepower, not crank horsepower, so you VG people, get off me. And then, you know, you can always spray a VQ35 with a 50 shot if you really wanted to. So, yeah, cool, good day.
Like and subscribe, guys.